Welcome to another week of the Sunbelt Conference podcast with Scott and myself. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I think that I like this new scheduling plan. Put a day in between the Sunbelt football games. Let us clear our heads a little bit and come ready.
Like I was telling you before we recorded, that used to be able to give me enough solace. I wouldn't have to be thinking about Texas State's last tough loss. Hopefully we can win some games now, and I'll never have to think of another loss again. I will say this. It wasn't the same without Texas State, and it was not the same without our game of the week. Troy and South Alabama got postponed. And this is a common occurrence now in the Sun Belt, it feels like, games being postponed. I think they're the only conference where it continues to happen. Why did this game get postponed, Scott?
I believe it was on the South Alabama side. There were some COVID issues there, and just for safety reasons, precautions, want to push it back. I think there was already probably a good amount of discussion about the Sun Belt moving its championship game back another week, and so it just kind of made that decision easier. And today, both of those things became official. The Sun Belt Championship moved back to December 19th, and Troy versus South Alabama rescheduled for December 12th.
Yeah, I like the schedule a lot more. It's still, I'm not super happy with the fact that the Sun Belt Conference is, commissioner and everybody lives in New Orleans. They all live in the same Superdome, and yet we continue to have the game played at the home of the team that wins the most games. I would prefer it if we just said, all right, we're just going to do this in New Orleans. What do you think about that? Are we happy with the way the conference schedule is set up right now?
As far as where the game is played, I don't have, much issue with it, especially so far since we've only seen two different teams in this in the championship game. If you're going to play it somewhere, I would play it in the Superdome. I would go West Florida Argonauts and play it in that baseball stadium. Super cool atmosphere. That's where I would go if you do a neutral site conference championship game. But for right now, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I think that Louisiana traveled well enough to Boone the last couple of years, and Boone is a great place to go to a football game anyway. Louisiana's got a nice stadium if they host this year. I'm not too upset about it personally.
Or our favorite team, Coastal, gets a host, and you never know. The
Ball
Teal
at the
Field.
beach.
I'm
Absolutely.
excited. I think they're going to do really good. All right, we're going to start with Coastal Carolina, however. They are the only undefeated team left in the Sun Belt Conference. Is that correct? 3-0. They beat Arkansas State 52-23 on Saturday. Coastal Carolina is rolling, Scott, and we picked them before the season. We said Coastal was our team. I'm a Texas State fan. You're a Troy guy. We had to pick a team in the East, and Coastal, man, they are rolling right now.
Absolutely. It's Coastal Carolina, and Louisiana, of course, is the other undefeated team on the other side. But Coastal Carolina looks amazing. This was a big game that we talked about last week. Pretenders or contenders for Coastal Carolina, and this was it. 52 points, the most points Coastal Carolina has ever dropped in a Sun Belt team in the history of its program. 133 points through 3 games. That is the fastest, biggest start in Coastal Carolina football history, going all the way back to 2003. This team looks really, really good. They did great holding Arkansas State's offense out of the end zone. I think Arkansas State still got their numbers as far as the passing game, but they could not score enough points, and Coastal Carolina could not be stopped. Not at any point in the game. It was just a train that just kept on rolling.
And we were talking about it before, the number of quarterbacks in this conference, and how it's funny that a team like Arkansas State and Texas State, I'm sorry I keep roping them in there, have 2 starting quarterbacks, essentially. You got 2 guys who could win that starting quarterback spot on any given week. Arkansas State in this game, the quarterback play, I wasn't really impressed by it. Were you?
Arkansas State, it just seems conservative right now. They're both pocket passing quarterbacks that take what they can get. There wasn't really a lot of highlight plays. Dahu Green made a fantastic catch in the back of the end zone in this game. But I just think the team is being really conservative right now, especially as the game goes on. Where is the Arkansas State that we saw play Kansas State that made those big plays, that rolled the dice, multiple points throughout the game? This is a team that scored 14 points in the first quarter and didn't score again until the fourth quarter. Get aggressive. You've got 2 great quarterbacks and a fantastic receiver core. Get aggressive, especially in games like this.
See, and that's the thing to me, is that if you're going to play Kansas State the way that you played them, really aggressive, pedal to the metal, you're going to try to put up as many points as you can. I think when you play a team like Coastal, I don't know if the the game plan wasn't the same or if their film told a different story. But Coastal Carolina, I think, is not at the level of Kansas State, clearly, not on the same talent level, clearly, but is just as good of a competitor and just as hard as a fighter. And I was disappointed in Arkansas State. I thought that they would come out with a little bit more fight.
Absolutely, but one thing we can't let go right by us is that Coastal Carolina defense is no joke. I mean, Teron Jackson didn't have a sack coming into today, surprisingly enough, or into Saturday, but he had 2 on Saturday in the first half. So this is a team that's very good. It's very disruptive. They're good at making plays. So we can't put it all on Arkansas State when obviously we're big Coastal Carolina fans. It's the defense that was good, that we knew was good coming in. It's the offense that's really taken this team to a different level.
We're going to talk a little bit more about Coastal Carolina when we talk about the games that we're excited for this week in the Big 12 championship game that they're going to be playing in. But for Arkansas State, the panic level, what is it right now? Because we told it last week, we said the panic level is probably not there for a lot of teams just yet. You lose to Coastal, maybe Coastal Carolina ends up winning the Sun Belt East. Maybe they end up winning the Sun Belt, and this loss looks like just another loss. But at the same time, I would be a little bit concerned giving up 52 points to Coastal.
If it wasn't for what I've experienced in the last year, I would say that this is not really a panic situation for Arkansas State, but I have seen this. They're 1-2, 2 good losses, Memphis, Coastal Carolina. Last year, this is what happened to Troy. They started off really, really slow, but their 2 losses were against very good teams, but they never gained traction the rest of the way. They couldn't put 2 and 2 together. They ended up losing to Coastal Carolina last year by 1 point. This is something that could happen to Arkansas State. If they don't regroup, regather, gain traction, gain momentum, they could be behind the 8 ball and under 500 by the end of the year.
That would be scary for Arkansas State. The Red Wolves play again later this week, and we're going to get to all the games coming up in a second. But Georgia State, they end up beating East Carolina 49-29, another high-scoring game in the Sun Belt Conference. Who knew the Sun Belt had so many teams that could put up 50 points, 50 burgers? East Carolina, though, was this a good game? Because I looked at the box score, and it told me a different story from the game I watched. The game I watched was Georgia State in control the entire time. They put up 21 points in the first quarter, really had command the entire game. But the box score kind of told me that this was a game that went back and forth. What was your takeaway?
It looks like Georgia State controlled it because East Carolina could not do a single thing on offense at all whatsoever. They only had 50 rushing yards. 31 of their 50 rushing yards came on a fake field goal. This is the only way Eastern Carolina could score. They did it on a pick six, I believe, a fake field goal, and a block punt touchdown. That's the only reason East Carolina stayed around in this game. Otherwise, I think Georgia State did, in fact, dominate. I think defensively they were phenomenal. I said it before the season in the magazine. You're going to see the defensive rebuild come all the way around for Georgia State this year. And so far, it's looking like that. They held Louisiana in check. They held East Carolina in check. So I feel like if Quad Brown, the quarterback, can continue to progress, this is a dangerous team. And I do think that this game was a very dominant game for Georgia State. If you look at it, almost half of East Carolina points were scored in the fourth quarter anyway, when this game felt like it was over.
Yeah, it's hard to say, all right, let's get 10 big takeaways or even 4 big takeaways from Georgia State. They won a game they were supposed to win. There's not a lot more than you can say besides that.
No, of course. I mean, Georgia State did great. What stood out to me was on defense, Antavius Lane, a safety. He's a freshman. I think we're going to have a article here coming soon on some of the Sun Belt's top freshmen breakout this year. Antavius Lane, Ant Lane, is definitely that guy. Had a pick six, 5 tackles, and 2 pass deflections. He's been phenomenal. And just that whole defense is really coming around this year, and that's something that's very new for Georgia State. I've been in that Georgia State deep in the fanhood before. Last year working as an intern, I know those people. I know what they've expected. I know what they've seen over the years. Defense is not something they've seen. Defense is always something that they've struggled with. And even now, there's still no expectations for a remotely good defense. So this is something that's very new for Georgia State, and it's something they can build on throughout the year.
All right, last game, ULM barely lost to Georgia Southern in what was another one of those games where, was it a poo-poo platter? A little bit. Georgia Southern comes out, wins 35-30. ULM falls to defeat it. They're 0-4, 0-2 in the Sun Belt Conference. ULM, pack it up, go home. What's the plan here for this program?
That was a gutsy performance. I think that you really saw Viatar's player coach personality come out, and this is not a team where everybody's thinking, okay, this coach isn't going to work out. You know, if nothing's working here. The program's in shambles. This is a team that loves their head coach regardless, and that they showed it on Saturday. But this is also a game where neither team won. This is one of those games where, yeah, one team got a W on the stat sheet, but you're not walking away thinking it's a win. ULM missed a wide open wide receiver in the end zone on third down, the second to last play of the game, and then came up half a foot short of the goal line on the very last play. If you're Georgia Southern, you're not taking that as a win. You should have lost that game twice. So, no, I think that ULM did play a phenomenal game, and I thought Georgia Southern played really badly, played really rough. But here's the weird thing with Georgia Southern. They have actually matched their opponent's skill level every game this year. They beat Campbell by what, 1 point? They just barely lost to Louisiana. It took a game-winning field goal at the end of the game. And then it took literally 3 inches of space to beat ULM. This is the 3 closest games I've ever seen a team start a football season with. It's incredible, and I want to see it keep happening.
So my question would be then, what do you take out of Georgia State or Georgia Southern? I'm sorry. Is Georgia Southern one of the better teams in the conference, or are they just a team that's a pretender? Because we talked about it last week with Coastal. We said, are they a contender or a pretender? You beat Arkansas State, great. You play ULM this close, man, and it smells like a pretender, to me at least.
Absolutely, I think so. But it depends on what they do going forward. If they continue to contend against everybody else, this is kind of a weird team. And I think that's kind of what you get with the triple option sometimes is you get shorter games, not as many possessions. So games tend to be closer. So they're going to have to figure it out. I don't think that Georgia Southern fans want to live and die every single game in the fourth quarter. I know I wouldn't want to do that. So for Georgia Southern's sake, do they play anybody this week? I haven't checked the schedule.
We can look at the schedule together real quick, going over it. But I wanted to go over the Sun Belt standings with you, too. Georgia Southern does not play this week. The Sun Belt standings. It's a funny thing how the conference works, right? Because because of COVID, you're playing some conference games. Some teams are playing 2 or 3 conference games, and now they're playing out of conference games. Bye weeks are happening because things are getting postponed. So I just want to quickly go through the conference standings currently right now with you. On the east side, Coastal is up 3-0. They're 1-0 in conference. Georgia Southern 1-1 in conference, 2-1. App State has not played a conference game, but they are 2-1 right now for their overall record. Troy hasn't played a conference game. They're 1-1 in an overall record. And Georgia State is 0-1 in conference, 1-1 in their overall record. Out of the East right now, going into, I guess, week 5 for some of these teams, week 6, how do we feel with these rankings right now? Do they accurately portray what the East looks like, or is this a anomaly that's going to correct itself quickly?
I think at the top, it kind of accurately displays what we're seeing for sure, especially with Coastal Carolina. They're right up there with BYU as one of the hottest teams in the entire country. At the bottom, it's a little bit different because you've got teams that haven't played yet, and you've got Georgia State who's only played Louisiana at the bottom. Mm-hmm. So we're going to see things kind of work themselves out in the East, but I would not be surprised if Coastal Carolina stays up top. I'm going to have to go find out when that App State game is because that is the brand new game of the year over in the East.
On the west side, Raging Cajuns, 2-0 in the conference, 3-0 overall. My mistake, they are the other 3-0 team. Texas State 1-0 in conference, 1-3 overall. South Alabama hasn't played a conference game, 1-2 overall. Arkansas State 0-1 in conference, 1-2 overall. And ULM, of course, defeated 0-2 in conference, 0-4 overall. Now, the Cajuns clearly are the best team. I think we all agree that the eastern side of this bracket continues to be the stronger side. But on the West, is this accurate, or again, is this an anomaly?
I think that contrary to the other side, I think the bottom is right, and I do think the top is still right with like Louisiana and ULM. Those two schools cannot be further apart right now. But in the middle, there's definitely a lot of sorting out to do. I'm still waiting to see who's the better team between Texas State and South Alabama. I think it's very clear that both teams have taken at least one or two steps forward. Right now, I think Texas State is moving a little bit better right now, but there's still a lot of football left to play, and I want to see who can come out on top over there. In Arkansas State, I want to see if they can pull it together, if they can, kind of find everything that they need to do right, because that could be troubling. If Arkansas State falls under second place in the West, fans are not going to be happy, because if you fall under second place in the West, who are you falling under? South Alabama, Texas State? If you end up underneath either of those teams, people are not going to be happy at all. So this is a dangerous spot for Arkansas State right now.
You know what's funny is that Arkansas State, when we look at like I don't know, you want to talk about the bigger markets. I think Arkansas State's one of the bigger markets in the conference, right? For a conference that's full of kind of small market teams. I think that they are one of the bigger ones. So I think they have a bigger fan base. If they do fall underneath Texas State or South Alabama, you are correct. There is some questions to be asked.
Absolutely. I went to Jonesboro for the first time this past summer. It's a lot bigger than I thought it was. So it is one of the bigger markets. I think in South Alabama, you got to kind of build the market there. Obviously, Mobile is a big city, but it still needs to be created. Something needs to be created there. Everybody in Mobile is either an LSU fan or an Alabama fan or an Auburn fan. There are no South Alabama fans. You don't see them very often. So that's something you got to kind of build in Mobile a little bit. But I do think that your three biggest markets in the Sun Belt are all on that side. Jonesboro, Lafayette, and Mobile. So whoever can kind of create the better team, Arkansas State, like you said, better market because they've been winning. They've been winning for a long time. I've always thought that if Texas State started winning, that would be something that would be very dangerous and very big for the Sun Belt Conference, because it's a great area, and I feel like it would just kind of explode. It would do big things. But the same thing for South Alabama, same thing for Louisiana. There's a lot of coverage of Louisiana football now. If South Alabama came up, there'd be a lot of coverage of them too.
This is true. I have a new segment for us, Scott, and I didn't tell you about it because I wanted to spring it on you. All right. New segment. We're going to go, what coach in the Sun Belt is going to get hired by a P5 team? Because as we know, Power 5 teams love to spend money on buyouts. They love to pay coaches too much money to go away. I'm looking around this conference and I'm saying to myself, there's got to be one or two guys who big Power 5 schools are looking at saying, hey, maybe he could make our program win. What do you think?
Well, I think right off the bat, the first place you go is Louisiana. I think that's obvious. I think Billy Napier, of course, he's made in the Nick Saban image. He's winning games. He built the team very quickly. He's done it very balanced. They've already created NFL prospects. This is a team that it's kind of surprising Billy Napier is still even with him after the last coaching carousel. I think he came back because this is an incredible team that he had, and I think it's going to be one more run at a big season for Louisiana and Billy Napier, and he's probably going to be out of there.
See, mine is Blake Anderson. I think that Blake Anderson is going to be, even if Arkansas State struggles this year, they say they fall third in the West. I'm looking at that coach. I'm looking at that team. And I think that there's a lot of Power 5 teams that are looking at him saying, I think he can get us to win. I just got this feeling right now that I think he's going to be a guy. You look at Scants. You disagree?
If he has a bad season, if Blake Anderson goes 5-7, I'm not sure he gets hired away, because this is a Blake Anderson that has really succeeded in his coaching career at Arkansas State, and he's in that conversation with other teams every single year, but he's never snatched away. So I don't feel like in his worst season at Arkansas State, that would be the time for him to get pulled out.
Counterpoint, it's one of those, when you see the ship sinking, you got to jump. And Arkansas State, maybe he looks around and goes, hey, maybe we didn't recruit as well as we need to. Couple job openings. Let's see what happens. All right, let's talk about the games this week. I'm going to hold off on the early morning kickoff of Coastal and Louisiana, because that clearly is the game of the week. But I want to go through some of these other ones. ULM plays Liberty. Central Arkansas plays Arkansas State. And Texas State and Troy, the civil war of this podcast, occurs this Saturday. Let's start with ULM and Liberty. because I think this is going to be ULM's first win of the season. Liberty comes in 3-0. What are your thoughts?
I don't think that this is going to be ULM's first win of the season. I
Really?
think that it's safe to say that ULM has used all of its magic for the year. They have one game where things get really weird. I think it was the last game. I think it was against Georgia Southern. They just didn't have enough in the tank. We're looking at an O in however many games ULM is going to play this year, I think. I feel like
Wow.
Liberty's going to smack them around a little bit here. Don't like Liberty. Nobody likes Liberty. But that's just kind of the fact of life here is Liberty comes into the Sun Belt and they beat Sun Belt teams for some odd reason. They just do that.
Well, they are 19.5-point favorites in this one. ULM has to travel to Liberty. But I'm just looking at it as I think ULM coming off of the loss that they just had, losing by 3 inches. Trust me, I've lost by 3 inches before. They're going to come into this one and they're going to, I think, push some guys around.
I don't think so. I think they're gassed. I think they're done.
Right.
ULM's over.
Let's go.
But
ULM is over party. All right. Central Arkansas goes to Arkansas State. That line hasn't been set yet, but Arkansas State, I would assume, is the favorite. I always forget that Arkansas has a ton of colleges in that state. And it's mind-boggling how a state that, like, small, because I'm coming from Texas, so it is like, the biggest state's no big deal, but it's a pretty big state. Arkansas continues to have school after school after school playing college football. More power to them, but I like Arkansas State in this one.
I do too, but very close. Whatever the line is going to be, I think this is not an FBS and FCS matchup where Las Vegas needs to, go, oh, we're not going to give a line for this one, not till really late in the week. Absolutely not. This is a UCA team that nearly took down North Dakota State on Saturday. So this is going to be a good game. We can't forget a few years ago, UCA took down Arkansas State in Jonesboro. It might happen again. This is a very good UCA team. And this is a game that I'll probably be watching.
No, 1,000%. And you're correct where they almost took out North Dakota State. I completely forgot about that. I still like Arkansas State. This is the game to turn it around. All right, let's talk Civil War. Troy, Texas State. Troy opens up as 7.5-point favorites. I feel like that's a little much. What do you think?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't think it's a little much. I think that I do think that Troy's going to have a good year. I think that we haven't really seen enough of Troy yet. We saw them play Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee is almost an FCS team at this point, kind of at the same level ULM. And then they played BYU, and BYU has just dismantled everything that they touched, just destroyed. And so I don't think that there's really reason to worry right now. But I do think that Texas State provides Troy its best challenge, not its biggest challenge, not its toughest challenge, but its best challenge. This is a Texas State team that's closer to Troy's talent level than either of the other teams that Troy has played so far. So I think this is going to be a big game. 7.5 is definitely a really tough spread. I'm taking Troy to win outright, but I don't know if I could take Troy to cover the spread. That's going to be something that I'm going to have to think about throughout the week.
All right, I'm taking Texas State in this one. Duh, that doesn't shock me. I think that Brady's going to play in this one. I'm hoping that Brady plays in this one. You've had an entire week off for Texas State. They got to bye this last week. And I'm looking at it like this. I think Texas State's finally figured out how to keep these guys from getting COVID. Because if you look at the other teams in the conference, no, hear me out. If you look at the other teams in the conference, there have been outbreaks, 20 guys, 10, 15 guys get this thing. And for Texas State, it continues to only be the quarterbacks who get sick. So I'm hoping in this bye week, they figured out, all right, we're going to put these guys in bubbles. We're not going to let these dudes hang out with the rest of this team. We're not going to let these guys hang out with the rest of the fans or go to class even. We're shutting you in your rooms, and we're going to have 2 quarterbacks playing in Troy. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that they get something going. But I like Texas State in this one. And you are correct. This is the best challenge that Troy has had, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And to your previous point, I don't know what Troy is doing, but Troy is doing something good because they haven't had any COVID issues whatsoever either this year. Yeah.
Knock on wood right there.
As soon as we throw this up, we're going to get some kind of news, I'm sure. But so far, Troy has done a fantastic job. Not even like individual key players missing any games so far. Everybody's testing negative. The athletic director always updates the fans right before the game starts or the day before the game and says, no negatives. We don't have or no positives. We don't have any positives, and so that's always a big deal. So whatever Troy is doing, they got to keep doing it. Keep the football players away from the people. There's a football player that lives in my apartment complex. I stay away from him. I don't want to mess anybody up. I stay away. I see him. I go back inside.
You know, you have an athletic director that talks to the fans. Does he have a Twitter
Absolutely.
account?
He does.
He interacts?
He interacts with people. He talks to me all the time. He's coming to my wedding.
Well, Troy already has a better AD than Texas State. All right, let's talk about the game of the week, Scott. And I hate ESPN for doing this to us. They're having Coastal and Louisiana kick off at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, meaning it's going to be the crack of dawn on the West Coast. All my West Coast homies aren't going to get to see Coastal Carolina beat the only ranked team in the Sun Belt Conference. I hate this. Let's talk about Coastal and Louisiana. This is going to be a tough one, Scott. I haven't found a line for it yet. I bet there's one out there. I'll look for it in a second. But what do you make of this matchup?
This is going to be fun. This is going to be great. I think it's the biggest thing is this game got moved up a week. So I don't want to know how that's going to affect game planning. I think game planning typically doesn't start till the Monday before anyway. But it does feel rushed, and maybe those players and maybe the coaches do feel a little rushed about their game planning. They're not facing the teams that they were expecting to face. So this could be something weird that happens. But as far as the game goes, this is huge. And it's crazy because this is just so random. 3 weeks ago, if you had said, hey, Coastal Carolina, Louisiana, biggest game in the Sun Belt, I would have laughed in your face. That would have been so funny. There's no way that's the biggest game in the Sun Belt. Coastal Carolina, the team that's gone 5-7 the last 2 years, well, they're 3-0 now. They got Grayson McCall, 4 touchdowns last week, over 300 passing yards. They destroyed Arkansas State, the team that's supposed to challenge Louisiana. They've beaten Kansas. This is a winning football team. Louisiana is a winning football team, but they have not destroyed anybody. They dominated. I felt like they kind of controlled the game against Iowa State, but they played to Georgia State's level. They played to Georgia Southern's level. I'm not the kind of guy I said last week. I'm not the kind of guy that's really concerned about playing to those levels as far as Louisiana just showed that they know how to win. But this will be interesting if Louisiana continues to just play to the level of their opponent. That'll make Coastal Carolina a very dangerous game on Saturday.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it. I can't find a spread. I can't find it. I'm looking all over, high and low. I need to call my bookie after this. But, okay, so my deal with this game, I think, Scott, is that if Louisiana beats Coastal, they've got to be a top 20 team in the country. And I don't want the AP voters to say, well, you beat another Sun Belt team, we're not going to move you up. This Coastal Carolina team was getting top 25 votes this last week. If Louisiana beats Coastal, they have to be, and I demand that they be a top 20 team in the country. Because we joked about this before. This is the Big 12 championship, okay? These are two Sun Belt teams who have beaten Power 5 matchup consistently and not beat them by, a lucky field goal, not beat them by a kick 6 or something. Beat legit college football powerhouses. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, Louisiana, you win this game, you're very high in my book.
Absolutely. I do think they should be top 20 if they win this game. You look at the voters have done this before for Sun Belt teams. They've moved App State into the top 20 before. They can do it with Louisiana, especially with Louisiana's wins if they add Coastal Carolina into it. I mean, Coastal Carolina just dominated an Arkansas State team that beat Kansas State, that just beat Oklahoma. These aren't bad teams. These are teams that every voter knows they have competed with the big boys. So if they're beating each other, if Louisiana has beaten Iowa State and then beat a Coastal Carolina team that has those wins, you have no choice, in my opinion, but to move them up.
Well, we'll figure it out next week. We'll break it down. Scott, did we miss anything? Are we good to go?
I think we're good to go.
All right. For Scott, for myself, Andrew Zimmel, continue to watch the podcast on YouTube. Continue to go read all of Scott's great work on Twitter.com. Scott, I'll talk to you next week.
That sounds good, Andrew.